say that you're the one that's in demand, and I don't know the score.
Taxes are the only certainty. Well, 20% of people of society. And I have made it on my own in this world. Well, nothing to get a turn around a 2-year-old. I'm gonna start my own nation and do my own thing, and I will be king. I'm gonna start my own nation with the self-preservation. I'm gonna start my own nation with the self-preservation. Well, let me talk a bit about the weather. You must admit it's not very clever. Don't get me wrong, it's not an anti-British song. Well, there is nowhere I would rather be wrong. I'm gonna start my own nation and do my own thing, and I will be king. I'm gonna start my own nation with the self-preservation. I'm gonna start my own nation with the self-preservation. There are just a few things that I would like to say about the UK and how I think it has gone astray. Don't get me wrong, it ain't all bad. I love the crazy fads, like England always buggering up, but you know we're gonna win the World Cup. I'm gonna start my own nation with the self-preservation. I'm gonna start my own nation with the self-preservation.
Keep the red flag flying here.
And welcome, pop pickers, to the 67th edition of Political Unmuted. We just go on and on. It's wonderful, isn't it? And we have the pleasure of 4 wonderful players of the game here. Paul, say hello.
Hello.
What you eating, Paul?
I just had a drink. Iron brew.
Don't eat in class, Paul. That's naughty. Hi, Sam.
Hi.
Hi, Jane. You again. You were on top form last week. We're expecting great things. Not that there's any pressure on you or anything like that, but sort of, my golly, you were going to say. And Kat, it's always a delight to see you. Hello.
Good evening, John. How are you?
I'm absolutely fine, thank you. Are you as quarrelsome and disagreeable as always, Kat? This is.
I should hope so, John.
Oh, golly, I hope so too. Your contributions just enliven the whole show. It's delighted to see them all. And the people arriving, Mia and Jackie Nash, Tim Dredge, hello, hiya. Everybody, you're just so welcome. And we've got a great lineup of issues, from the trivial to the absolute central to democracy issues today. But let's start with. Now, I'm telling tales here. Everybody has been sat there before the show saying, "Oh, I don't know what I'm going to do. I haven't got one. Oh, dear me, I'll have to think of one." And Paul was having trouble as well. Too many. Paul has too many to choose from. Everybody else hasn't got one to choose from. I'm going to tell you my moment of the week. I rarely do so, but my moment of the week, bless her, was Greta Thunberg. Sort of when she called COP26, what was it? The global greenwash conference of the North. Blah blah blah. Wonderful, and thank God for that young lady. Sort of speaking out as she does. Well, seeing as you found it difficult because you have so many, and don't be naughty. You can't slide in two like you sometimes do into the one. What's your moment of the week, Paul?
I think I would be breaking the habit of a lifetime if I didn't slide in two, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to not slide in two. Mine's related to yours. We had a brilliant thing on COP26. We were calling it COP Out 26 and all sorts of different things on Saturday night. We had some absolutely outstanding activists there. We had Aoife Mercedes, Carlos Tornell, and Liam Tuckwood, who were absolutely brilliant speaking about all the things. So if you want to learn a little bit about COP26, we talked a lot about how Indigenous people live as well, and what a climate crisis is for those people who've been living a sustainable lifestyle, and yet they're the ones who are suffering the immediate effects. They've been talking about a climate catastrophe for years and years and years, and only when it starts to affect the West a little bit more has people started declaring these emergencies there, and they kind of find it funny that we're now all of a sudden saying, oh, there's a climate crisis, and when they've lost their homes and they're really suffering those consequences. And maybe we could learn a lot about the way other people live by learning from them and listening to them. So it was really, really good. And there was also, if anyone speaks Spanish, there was a little Spanish section in there. I didn't understand it at all, but it was good.
Thank you, Paul. I didn't watch that, and I should have done, and I apologise to you. I will do. Jane!
My moment of the week was when I saw that Jeremy Corbyn, Diane Abbott and Richard Burgon had gone to Belmarsh Prison with Stella Morris and Julian Assange's son Max to demand their right as MPs to see Julian Assange, and it just made me very proud to know that we've got people like them standing up for us, and it made me quite proud to know that we had a leader of the Labour Party like that. That made me really happy.
That's thank you very much, Jane. Yes. He's still really the leader of the Labour Party. I don't think anybody thinks otherwise, to tell you the truth. Kat, moment of your week.
I think I was trying to work out if it's technically within the week, but I think it is just, which is the results through from the UCU union, who've they had a few ballots out, I think, over a couple of things, but within a 3-week period, they've managed to turn around a mandate for strike action. Not all of the universities that they balloted, but I think something like 58, upwards of 60 universities. So that's an enormous achievement to turn around that kind of result in 3 weeks. So my hat's off to them. I think there's even talk of reballoting to get an even bigger mandate. But in the context of the Tory anti-trade union laws, I think that is a significant victory in the trade union movement, and I look forward to supporting them on the picket lines.
Thank you, Kat, and thank you for your work in that area. I thought that, I mean, that was a very important moment of the week, and I don't want to belittle it, but I would have thought you would have mentioned your cake.
Well, I don't know if it's cooked yet. I said, just as I joined the call, I said, I'm going to have to disappear just before we begin because I've got a cake in the oven. But as I was explaining, it's one of those I needed to use up last minute ingredients, and then it all became too complicated, and then I was in too deep. And now, who knows? I'll find out after tonight if it's edible or not.
Well, feel free to go and check the cake, because the cake is really important. And really, truth be told, when we finished at 10 o'clock, if you can have a little slice to tell us what it tastes like for the second half, I think that, Sam, that'll be a major question for the second half of the show if it's cooked. Finally, Sam, your moment of the week.
Well, I amused my Facebook friends and got a message from the universe this week when I accidentally turned up at County Hall with odd shoes on. It was hilarious. And they weren't even similar shoes. You know, we're not talking, you know, a brown and a slightly lighter beige court shoe here. We're talking about one shoe and one trainer. And I have no idea how I did it, except that I was obviously rushing around like the person who I am. Have I slowed down? No, I have not, but I will.
Well, be sort of, I'm not going to make any cruel jokes. It's clearly the fact that you are just rushed off your feet and you haven't got the time to concentrate on minor things like what shoes you wear. You're dealing with big issues like how do we have three central offices at Durham County Council. We've got two, and that's clearly not enough. We need three. These are the big issues you're dealing with. There's no wonder you can't work out which shoes to wear. Thank you for those moments of the week. Anybody, feel free to share your moments of the week with us on the chat line. What did you have a moment of the week which trumps the Dream Team's moments of the week, or sort of share them? It'd be really lovely to hear yours. But for the moment, we're moving on.
Now it's time for the big story.
This story started little, but it grew and grew and grew, didn't it? This is the Owen Paterson Sleazy scandal. And it looked as though it was going to be very tiny. And then it suddenly exploded in their faces, didn't it? Sam, tell us all about it.
Yeah, so like many of us, I had no idea who Owen Paterson was until a couple of weeks ago. Apparently he's the same guy who said that like waspy women could go and pick fruit if they needed some more money. So that when I found that out, it really endeared me to him. But apparently he has been taking on paid lobbying work from a sausage company, and they paid him a lot of money to basically represent them in Parliament. And the first thing I heard of it was that there was going to be a debate on scrapping the whole parliamentary standards process. And like, it's not like there have been no MPs that have had to go through the parliamentary standards process. And it's just strange that suddenly they were like, oh no, it's nothing to do with our friend who has done this thing, but we really think the whole process needs to be abolished and reviewed, and it will have the unexpected consequence of helping him get off. And then like a couple of days later, they were like, oh, but he's had a really hard life, you know, he's had a really hard time, his wife has died. And I'm just like, look, I mean, obviously, like, I'm not made of stone. That stuff makes me feel bad, but just because somebody's had a really bad time the last few years doesn't mean they're allowed to break the rules and subvert the democracy that this country is built on. So it's been a strange time, and now the gossip is, of course, that this whole episode, because of course they voted to destroy the parliamentary standards process. And then the next day, they found out they couldn't because it had to be cross-party. And at that point, they backpedaled and went, oh, no, well, we didn't really mean it. We've reflected now, we were wrong. But in that 24 hours, a lot of damage was done, including, apparently, the whips telling backbenchers that if they voted against the government, then they would have less money for their constituency. And that's one of those things, we all know they're saying these things. We all know they're using these things against these new super keen Tory backbenchers. But when it's sort of confirmed and laid out in print, you're just like, what is going on in our country? You know, this is not how things are meant to be.
Do you think this is a Labour victory, Sam? I mean, do you have this down as a Labour victory or just a self-inflicted defeat?
You know, I mean, I would like to claim it as a Labour victory, but the fact of the matter is, if you talk to people out there, they won't say Tory MPs are crooks and Labour MPs are squeaky clean. They will say they all piss in the same pot. They're all as bad as each other. They're all doing it. And while I do believe, and I very much hope in my core, that Labour MPs are more honest than Tory MPs, you do also, we've now moved on to this debate about second jobs for MPs. And there are some Labour MPs arguing quite passionately that MPs shouldn't have second jobs, which I totally agree with. And then there are some who are like, oh, no, we can't be telling people what to do. What if people really need to have a second job because it helps them be grounded? And you're like, no, you're an MP. If that's not a full-time job, I don't know what is.
Thank you. Kat, what's your take on all this?
I mean, I am of Sam's thinking. They all piss in the same pot, and we know that Starmer took significant amounts of money back in 2016, 2015 for doing work, for doing legal consultancy work. But I think for me, one of the elements that have come out with the least stink on them is the Parliamentary Standards Committee, who have sat there. They've explained their processes. I wasn't aware of them. I've actually paid attention. I've done my research. It's got me a little more interested in how that committee works. And it reminds me, much like the select committees, how all of those different processes work. It does benefit us to understand how they work, and to understand if they're working well, as in the Parliamentary Standards Committee, who did a thorough investigation, how their findings can be theoretically overturned, even though, as Sam pointed out, they worked out, oh, hang on, we can't actually do what we want to do. But, you know, what we witnessed was a government say, this hasn't worked in our favour, we'll replace you. And that's not democracy. That's sliding even more rapidly towards a totalitarian state.
Sam, did you put your hand up because you wanted to speak? Or?
No, my camera keeps going blurry, so that's how I tell it to stop it.
That's okay. And can I apologise to you? What happened is I suddenly realised that I hadn't plugged in my computer and it was just about to run out of battery and I was about to disappear altogether. So I had to very rudely find the plug and plug it in when you were talking. Paul, do you think that this, I mean, one of the things that the Tories said was that it's an old-fashioned system and it needs bringing into the 21st century. I mean, did that have any warrant behind it, or was it just the excuse that they were looking for?
I think all of Parliament needs bringing into the 21st century, to be honest. And I think they've really shot themselves in the foot using that terminology. You know, look at the system we've got. We've got it's not just second jobs here. A lot of us are talking about second jobs. And through this thing, like they've rehabilitated certain characters as well, haven't they? This is, oh, John Major has said this and stuff like that. Well, he's still a Tory, and you've got and they all like, it was like when they were saying Theresa May's great, and Theresa May had dignity, and she sent go home vans around London and was responsible for the hostile environment that meant people were getting deported, like nanas were getting deported who'd been here the vast majority of their lives, during Windrush. These people get rehabilitated out of these things. Let's not beat about the bush here. There's a lot of corruption in Parliament, and it does happen on both sides of the aisle, sadly. We know this. We know there's a revolving door between lobbyists. Like, so is Owen, what do you call him with the ice cream? Owen Smith. Is he working for Pfizer again? Because he was a lobbyist and then became an MP, and then is he working for Pfizer again? I'm not quite sure what's going on there, but I know like a lot of the Change UK, the Tinge group, they ended up going into lobbying. So I believe Tom Watson's working for a pro-gambling firm. I may be wrong on that one, but I believe that's one of the roles he's gone into. There are other roles that Chuck Ramoon has gone into, and there's. That group of people went and made a lot of money out of their connections in Parliament. This is happening all over the place. So, yes, second jobs are a really bad thing, but also, so is owning 16 properties and making a lot of money out of being a landlord. Is that not a job? Either a landlord is a job that you have to go and do, and you have to go and, do a bit of handiwork and stuff like that, or it's just, some sort of awful thing where you own property and rent it out to people at more than it costs you to have. We know Paul Howell's a big landlord. We know he's the biggest landlord in Parliament. But what about the other things? What about massive inheritances? What about Sajid Javid, who went from being the Chancellor to working for which one was it? Which massive bank was it that he went to work for? I know he worked for Deutsche Bank before, but he ended up moving out, and he actually had a job while in Parliament, and then he left it and came back and was the health secretary. Now, does he have links with those firms? Of course he does. Of course he has interests in massive insurance companies that might want to privatise our NHS. That's a conflict of interest. There's conflicts of interest going on all over the place. So this is way bigger than just sleazy Owen Paterson. And the fact that Boris Johnson, again, was willing to, this was the hill he was choosing to die on, another hill he's chosen to die on. He doesn't seem to actually ever come out of anything particularly badly. I think he's come out of this one a lot worse because more people seem to have got hold of it and gone, no, we've had enough of this. He's really, really sleazy. He is a liar. But, I don't know, is it having the impact that we would desire? I'm not sure, and I don't think the Labour Party can claim it as a victory. I was finished.
No, because I'm going to want you to clarify, to chase up one of those ideas, because what I notice is that on this one, he's had significantly as much of a bad time from the Tories as he has from the Labour Party. That Tories have been very, very vocal in criticising him. I love your idea, by the way, that about using a crisis to rehabilitate people. This is what these people do. A crisis is always a great chance to sort of make some progress in various other areas and make some money and score some points. But I want you to just think about that. Do you think that this has damaged Johnson with the Tories?
Internally, it probably has. Internally, it probably has, because they want to appear to be doing the right thing. It's very important. Their brand is, we are the Tory, we're conservatives, or we're upstanding, we're this, we're that. They're not, are they? They're not. They are for big business. We know there's a revolving door between lobbyists and between big business and MPs. We know this, but they don't really want us to know this. And that's a problem for them. So I think the way Johnson's handled it, a few people have really panicked. I think they're more panicked about how it looks than what has been done.
Thank you. Kat, I want to come back to you just about one other issue there that Paul touched upon. And I mean, one of the things that a Tory would say is that, well, yes, there are these unsatisfactory links to big business and this link with lobbying, but Labour MPs are significantly linked to and obligated to the unions. Is there a difference sort of between the link between Labour MPs and being funded by, openly funded by and influenced by big unions, and sort of Tory MPs being paid by and therefore influenced by big business? Is it not the same thing?
No, of course it's not, John, but I appreciate you trying to get me angry. It's too early. I've got to work up. No, we have to look ethically at what that model represents, and we also need to look to the history. I mean, the Labour Party itself, one of the forefathers of my union, the ASRS, among others, were the founders of the Labour Party. And the reason the Labour Party came into existence was to represent workers, because we didn't have a voice. And if we look at how ethically our government functions, who represents who, I would say that a party that represents millions of workers is far more democratic than a party that represents a select few's business interests. You know, that I'll go for the Corbyn line. It's dangling like a bait in front of my nose, that the many, not the few. So how we do representative democracy requires the involvement of unions who represent workers. They're not the only ones that do. We're not the only ones at the party, but we have the ability to be organised. And we have some of the unions have the funds to do that too. So when we talk about strong links, those links are getting weaker and weaker, John. We've seen the Bakers Union at their special annual general meeting cut their ties formally with the Labour Party. The RMT did that several years ago. I think it was CWU this week that said above their affiliation fee, they're not going to contribute more funds. So we're seeing the tide turning here, not necessarily to separate from the Labour Party, although I suspect something like that is likely, but where the trade unions who have been in neutral potentially for some years have said, no, you don't represent our values, you won't get our funding. But what it does come down to is representing our values as workers versus representing the value of millionaires to continue being millionaires.
Thank you, Kat. What a brilliant answer. God bless you. And finally, Jane, there's in Newton Aycliffe, there's a political website that discusses, basically slags off the Labour Party. And one of the things that basically what has been happening there is that the response on there of some of the members of that body to this clear uncovering of sleaze and Tory is just to list Labour sleaze, starting with Claudia Webb and all the issues there, and sort of basically saying what Sam said right at the very beginning, they both are as bad as each other. Now, like I asked Kat about sort of, is it not the same thing? Are the two parties just not as bad as each other? Or does the left have a moral high ground here?
I think that there are good MPs in both parties. I think there are more good MPs in the Labour Party, and I look at people like Jeremy Corbyn, John McDonnell, Diane Abbott, Richard Bergonzalo Sultana, Belbibero Addy, so many who, you know, they've put their necks on the line. They face horrific abuse from the public, from trolls. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn's faced death threats on, I don't know how many death threats he's had. He doesn't talk about it, but you know, there was a terrorist in court who openly admitted that he'd been plotting to kill Jeremy Corbyn and Sadiq Khan. And these are good people who have chosen to put their necks on the line, raise their heads above the parapet for all of us, to help us all to make society a better place. And you can't just focus on the bad. And what we need to be thinking about is what can we do to be holding the MPs to account, because that's why we're here. Power can corrupt and wealth can corrupt, but it doesn't corrupt everyone. And we're here and we're supposed to be holding them to account and saying, actually, no, that's not okay. So I think it's just really sad to look at it from that point of view, because that's so demotivating. It's the reason lots of people don't go out to vote. It's the reason why lots of people don't have a voice politically, and we need to move away from that if we can.
I mean, and this is what made this particularly a nasty scandal, because the attempt was, I mean, there's always going to be bad eggs in every batch, but this was an attempt to change the body that seeks out those bad eggs in Parliament. And that was what made this particularly dangerous. Have you got any a final say about it? What's your overall thinking about the Owen Paterson scandal? Jane, just sort of, I'm looking to you to fulfill the Stuart Sutherland role here of just coming up with some kind of absolutely whammy punch that leaves everybody open-mouthed.
Oh, I can't do whammy, I'm afraid. I can't do Stuart, but it just makes me quite frightened for our democracy to see the lengths that the current government is prepared to go to so very blatantly. They got away with illegally proroguing Parliament last year, and I think that gave them a lot of confidence, and it terrifies me, the legislation they've been putting through, and then to see them do something as absolutely blatant as this, and to see the way that they've tried to talk their way out of it. It's just disgusting. And then to see Boris Johnson walking around a hospital without a mask on yesterday, endangering patients and staff, so very arrogant. I've not heard him apologise for a single thing of the terrible things that he's done since he's been in as Prime Minister, and previously for his actions regarding Richard Radcliffe's wife, who's in prison in Iran, very much, well, I would say because of a comment that he made that was extremely unhelpful to the Iranian authorities. So it frightens me. It makes me really sad for our democracy.
First of all, that was a class Stuart comment, I thought, personally. But Laura says you do a class Jane Strange and sort of stay who you are. I'm being told off by Laura Daly. There we go. Right. Thank you. And fabulous comments, everybody. But it's time to move on. This is a strange one, isn't it? And coming from Yorkshire, a very distressing one, almost as distressing as the Owen Paterson scandal for a Yorkshire person. So, Paul, I'm going to sort of tell us all about the Yorkshire Cricket Club racism scandal. What's gone on here? And particularly, try as you go along and tell us the story, try and explain to us why it's such a big deal.
Well, because racism, I'll start off.
I know racism's a big deal.
It's a big deal because racism's a really big deal and we shouldn't be doing it. But, you know, it's an absolutely awful thing for people to do. But anyway, so Yorkshire Cricket Club, it was one of their players, Azim Rafiq, was reported to Yorkshire Cricket Club that he had been racially abused in a number of different ways. And it was almost that the kind of racial abuse that he faced was endemic. It was just like, you know, it was part of their day-to-day life of the club, the way they would speak to him. I'll not repeat the slurs. You can go and find out those by yourselves. You can go and read them if you want to know the sort of things that were said to him. So anyway, Yorkshire Cricket Club decided that they would do an investigation into it, and the investigation upheld like 7 out of his 49 claims or something along those lines, saying that yes, these things had happened, this was racial abuse, but basically it's just a bit of banter. That's the way people talk to each other, and that's like, it's okay, and nothing really happened other than, oh well, you know, it was just a bit of banter. So he, Azim Rafiq said he was going to now, like, you know, complain to a higher level and name names. Yorkshire Cricket Club have subsequently had their chairman resign, I believe, because of this scandal. But he's kind of blaming the English Cricket Board, the ECB, because he said he went to them for help and none was forthcoming. But I think there's a big issue here, because for me, growing up, I actually used to, when nothing else was on the telly, my grandparents would sit and watch cricket, and you'd play against teams like the West Indies, and you'd play against teams like India and Sri Lanka and Pakistan, and from all over the world. And actually, when I was growing up, they weren't playing against South Africa because of the cultural boycott of the apartheid South Africa. So in my head, I always thought it's actually quite a multicultural sport. It's a great leveler. There's a lot of respect. There was always there didn't seem to be. I'm not sure whether whether it appeared that there was less racism in cricket because of that respect that teams had for one another. The fact that when I was growing up, the West Indies were the best team in the world, and so obviously you knew that black players were extremely good, extremely capable. There wasn't this hierarchy or anything like that where they were saying actually these players. So I always thought cricket was quite multicultural, and I was pleased about that. But hearing things, there's a lot of cricketers who are saying in England that things haven't been like that. Michael Carberry, who played for England, who's a black player, a batsman, said he suffered racism throughout his career. And I just think the way that the Yorkshire Cricket Club have tried to pass off the comments as banter, this is okay, this is kind of how they spoke to each other. On one hand, I can understand it, because I've been in changing rooms when I've played football where people have said horrible things, horrible racist things, and actually racism used to be said in front of me because I would react to it, because I would say, you can't talk like that, that's absolutely bang out of line, and it was quite a lonely place to be. Luckily we didn't have any people who that was aimed at within our changing room. But these kind of things do happen in sport. There is a culture within sport and within society of racism that I think that people don't like to acknowledge. A kind of horrible underbelly that people pass off as racism, as banter, when it's actually deep-seated racism. So they've really failed to deal with this, Yorkshire Cricket Club, and it's caused them a massive scandal. And I suppose this has been something that was going to cause a problem for a long time, reading into it, that young Asian players felt more at home in Lancashire than they did in Yorkshire, for example. And that is a real travesty, because Yorkshire's got this rich history of being the best ever county cricket club in England or in the UK. So yeah, it's a big old mess. For me, it reminds me that there is racism everywhere, and also the big thing is, as well, as they were sitting there and kind of going blah 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 blah, this very apparently old fashioned view that this isn't really happening, and bury their heads in the sand and not really acknowledging it. And I think that's been the big thing that's come out of it, that it wasn't acknowledged. It is a big problem, and now they're starting to see big problems, and they've lost the sponsorship and all sorts of different things again, because sponsors don't want to be associated with that. I'm not sure how interested those sponsors are. They're not this particular individual sponsor, but I think, again, it's how things appear. I think that's always how things appear, rather than actually wanting to deal with the problem. But that's a kind of side issue.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you for explaining all that to us. As a Yorkshireman, I was always tremendously proud of Yorkshire Cricket Club and how of their great traditions and their successes, particularly when I was a young man. And this has come as a big blow, I think, to many Yorkshire people, because you can't be proud of that county cricket club anymore. You can't be proud. Kat, you have a particular sort of view of this whole issue, which you shared with me before we started the show, and I really hope that you're going to share it with everybody now, because I thought it was very refreshing and very important.
Well, for the record, I'm a Yorkshire woman too, born and raised in York, although my accent went many years ago. But yeah, I said in conversation before the show started that the sport of cricket has along with it a history of colonialism, which I think that we do need to recognise. But I'd like to jump on a slightly different point and talk about the difference between performing anti-racism and being anti-racist. Because the point Paul made about the sponsors, the advertisers not wanting to be interested, and the reason they don't want to be interested is they want to make as much money as possible. And if there's a brand reputational effect to someone's racist acts, they want to go and make more money off a different product. So that's capitalism's version of reacting to racism. I don't believe they're making that judgment on an ethical basis. But when we talk about performing racism as opposed to being anti-racist, we have to talk about education. So when we listen to those conversations, and I've seen various comments in the chat talking about banter and what that means, we also have to talk about what it's like to be in that situation. I've been in situations where sexist or homophobic things have been said to me, and I've been in an environment in which I didn't feel I could challenge it, and I've pretended to laugh it off. So listening to the different cricket players say, well, he was my mate and it was just banter, that has to be challenged in how we perceive racism. And we have to look at structurally how that has infected our society. And yes, we do need to look to our colonial history. There are reasons why the countries that Paul named play cricket. And I think it would do us well to remember that.
You always introduce so many interesting aspects and have such a different view. Thank you for those ideas, Kat. They were just so helpful. Jane, one of the things that the Yorkshire chairman said was that he didn't think the people at Yorkshire Cricket Club were racist. He thought they were just old-fashioned. And I think there's certainly within this, there's an element of we're Yorkshire and we do it our way, and we're responsible to nobody. I mean, do you buy that argument, or sort of is this just people who haven't joined the modern century, or is it a racist underbelly, like Paul said?
Potentially, I think perhaps they're part of a generation that grew up in a world where racism was a lot more accepted than it is now. I don't know if that's really a good excuse to not move with the times when it's something that's causing people so much pain and hurt. Perhaps they don't know the history. Perhaps they just don't know a lot of facts. I've learned a lot in the last year or two. I'm shocked. I'm absolutely amazed at the evils done by this, the British Empire. It's absolutely horrific. And I wouldn't have thought racism was okay before that, but I had no idea the pain and suffering that are being caused. So perhaps that's part of it. Perhaps we need a bit more education.
I tend to agree, Jane, that sort of you've got to have been living in a cupboard not to realise that these words are unacceptable in any context. Sam, finally to you, last word. Sort of, is this just Yorkshire Cricket Club? Is it a problem with cricket? Is it a problem with sport? Or is it just that these things are reflective of what the hell is going on in society nowadays?
I think, it's a problem in society which is exasperated in sport and in toxic masculinity and the banter culture where anything is excused by just saying, oh, it was just a joke, mate, it was just a joke. And actually, it's just a joke when they're pulled up about it. But until they're pulled up about it, that's where they're going in the conversation. It's like, it's a way of testing the water. It's a way of seeing how other people feel. And it is the thin end of the wedge of the really other extreme, violent, sexist, racist, horrendous actions that we've seen over the last few months, unfortunately. And we need to make sure every one of us is taking that opportunity to call out vile, discriminatory attitudes at every opportunity, so that there is no space for that kind of banter in our society.
Thank you, Sam. A good conclusion to the debate. Moving on, Hey everybody! For the first time, this is the 67th show, and for the first time, we're on time. We're keeping to the schedule.
It's because of that. Stuart Sutherland's not here. You can't.
That man who talks so much. Yes, I know. Jane's drawn the short straw. I think this is potentially the most divisive issue. Should we ban Bonfire Night? Is Bonfire Night just too stressful for our cats and dogs, and we need to ban it, or at least ban fireworks, or at least ban noisy fireworks, so our dogs don't have nervous breakdowns? Jane, what do you think about this?
I've never felt very strongly about this because I used to have a dog and she wasn't bothered by fireworks at all, luckily. But I was reading some of the things people write on the local Facebook groups in the area over the weekend with all the fireworks going on. There was a dog ran away in fear, and the owners couldn't find it. There was a little dog in the area had a heart attack and died during the fireworks. And if that had been my pet, that was like family to us, and that would have been absolutely devastating. So I have been reading a bit about this, and I saw there's a petition going around that made some really sensible suggestions. So I hadn't realised that actually you can buy fireworks that are different decibels, or that they can tell you how many decibels they're going to be, and they don't print that on the labels at the moment, but they could do. And also that you can buy fireworks that are decibels that are actually above the threshold to cause pain to human beings. So why, is it really worth having something pretty in the sky that's a little bit brighter when it can hurt people? Also, it does seem like there were lots of guidance for pet owners to say try and avoid doing this at this time, but at what time? Because there were fireworks just about every night for a month, so you can't reasonably make adjustments for it. So perhaps we should think about limiting it to specific times so that people can have that period where they're managing what they're doing rather than just not knowing. And you also do hear about incidents. There was an incident in my town with some people throwing fireworks at people's faces as they walked past in the street, which was quite nasty, and they shouldn't really have got hold of the fireworks in the first place, but they did. And perhaps we need to think about people's safety as well.
I mean, do you think it's feasible, Jane, to legislate for certain times? I mean, you say those people who are throwing fireworks in people's faces, they're not going to say, "Oh, for goodness' sake, it's 9:30. We better knock off now." Are they? Do you not think that there's got to be some kind of ban at shop level, at production level?
I think some stricter licensing, and I hadn't realised that there were already licensing. I don't know if licensing is the right word, but apparently normally you can only have fireworks until 11 p.m. at night, except for on certain days of the year, and you can have them till midnight. And I didn't know that, so there are already rules. Perhaps we need to just think about tightening them up a bit more, and perhaps they shouldn't be quite so easy to purchase. If you can still go to a nice firework display in your town, then do you really need to have them in your garden if it's going to cause distress to people?
Thank you. Didn't Jane know an awful lot about that? I learned an awful lot when she was talking. Thank you very much, Jane. That's fantastic. Paul, you got a dog. I mean, are you easy about noisy fireworks, or do you agree with Jane that we need to be much tougher?
I think for one night a year, it's kind of fun, or a couple of nights a year, it's kind of fun to have them. People can prepare if they know the time. People can make little dens and stuff like that. There are ways around this to make it. Luckily, my dog really reacts really well to fireworks. She's not distressed, which is it's a real positive for us. But it's not just that, is it? It's not just that. Like, it's the days on end and stuff, and also let's face it, there are people who are celebrating burning Catholics and actually talking about that quite openly on Bonfire Night, how brilliant it is to burn some Catholics and how brilliant it is to get rid of the guy who was going to burn down Parliament, who was going to do this thing. This is kind of a political statement. This is kind of a political statement of know your place. If you step on us, we will burn you. And that is what we are teaching kids. It's a bit weird to teach people that. I know it's part of history and things, but whether or not you celebrate it, it's a bit odd. And as I say, it's a bit offensive when people are saying, yes, it's Catholic Burden Night and stuff like that. And this does happen. Like, you know, other people might not notice this, but it does happen. And also, you know, like restricting fireworks so the kids don't blow their hands off or burn themselves to death, that kind of thing. That's a big deal for me as well. And whether that's because they've bought it themselves and they don't know how to handle it, or if they hurt someone else with it. These are things that we probably should be very, very controlling of explosives. Like, I think if you're going to have explosives, it's probably fair enough not to just sell them to children, etc. So, yeah, there are arguments for maybe having just controlled firework displays. Because, to be fair, they're a lot better anyway than doing your own. The proper ones are really, really good. And the little ones that people have in the gardens tend to be quite rubbish. So
dangerous.
Yeah.
Dangerous. Kat, how do you feel about this? Sort of, have you got any huge insights on an oblique kind of way that will help us understand this issue in its context? I think Paul's stolen your thunder on that by talking about going back to its anti-Catholic roots.
Well, I'd also point out that the reason we have fireworks around November, at least in places I've lived, is not just firework night, it's Diwali. And Diwali is, you know, 5 or 6 nights long, and it is the victory of light over darkness. So there are some firework events happening around this time in November that aren't just about burning Catholics, and Paul is quite right. But how do we police noise pollution, or how do we legislate for that? I don't think there's an easy answer. I think it would be in small controls, not big ones, in awareness. I would hope that actually what would create a safer environment for everyone is for communities to be communities and to talk to each other and to understand what people's needs are and to care for them. I don't think there's a perfect answer. I don't think that you can handcuff people for setting a firework off, nor should you. But to find a balance of love and compassion for one another, that's a good start. Maybe we should be celebrating Diwali instead of burning Catholics.
Brilliant points. Thank you very much. Sam, do you have any pets, Sam?
Only the chickens, and they don't mind.
They're cool with fireworks, aren't they? Sam, is this a political issue, or is it should it, I mean, basically, I'm asking you, should we be discussing it at all? Is it a political matter at all, this?
Well, I mean, fireworks night and the other, you know, the fireworks season does tend to be a bit of a problem for people like me, because you get the fireworks, the kids get the fireworks, it feeds into antisocial behaviour and criminal damage. Actually didn't happen so much this year, but I think that's because we had a bit of a spike of antisocial behaviour before Bonfire Night, so things got clamped down on quite early, which is good for me. Not that anybody will ever realize that's what happened. So I think there is something in there about restricting who is able to buy what type of firework. I think that's probably something that a responsible government should be looking at. But then I also know that last year, like, it was all black market stuff. People were selling stuff out the back of cars, so you can't legislate for things that people are gonna do illegally. So maybe that's about stronger trades. That one that cracks down on dodgy people. Oh, it's gone. Never mind.
I know what you're talking about.
Yes.
Trading standards.
That's
Trading
right.
standards. There you
Well
go.
done,
I think they're a bit toothless. Maybe they could have a few more teeth to clamp down on people who are willingly peddling explosives to children out of their car boot.
Thank you very much indeed. Is it an issue for, just quickly, because we're in danger of overrunning after doing so well, is it an issue for Parliament, or is it an issue for councils, do you think?
Well, it's got to be Parliament that's going to give people the funding and the powers to do things. I think councils are doing a very good job, and they're doing the best with what they've got.
Thank you very much indeed. Brilliant. And right, what I've doing now, people, is for our last question, I've just posted on the Facebook page a link to The Guardian. And it's a Guardian article, Charge Retreat, Boris Johnson's top U-turns in number 10. That is 10 top U-turns, there's many more than 10. And so I asked whether people wanted to hear this discussed, and yes, you did. Your poll said quite clearly this was something that you wanted to talk about, Boris Johnson's top U-turns. So basically what I asked my team to do was to just choose their number 1 U-turn, and then they can tell us all about it and why it is so damaging for Boris Johnson. And we and I think because we're on time, we may have time for everybody to have a say. Let's start with Kat. Kat, what was your number 1 U-turn of Boris Johnson?
So mine was Christmas lockdown. So, you know, as we all may remember, come the 19th of December, I think it was. And most of us were aware things were really not looking good, yet we'd had this sort of repeated signs coming from government that we'd still be able to meet our families, we'd still be able to have some form of Christmas. And there's a part of me, I mean, we could list 100 and there'd still be 100 more of things he's said and then not held to, or that he's reversed on. But I think there was an emotional impact on our psyche as a society on that, because I think the emotional cost was so great. It's like a collective trauma that we all experienced, in which you had families passing presents at motorway service stations, and a significant amount of sudden isolation. So people have been in this semi-permanent isolation and were given a window of you'll be allowed to do this. And then the drawbridge came down a few days before Christmas. And I think the emotional damage of that did affect the way people saw him. Not consistently, but I think we do carry that with us collectively as a society about what harm that did to our emotions, psychologically speaking.
Thank you. If you're on the chat streams or any of the chat streams, look up the article and tell us what you think the number 1 U-turn was. I'm sure Sam will be very interested when she comes to the second half to sort of, because there's just loads there. Jane, what was the one that sort of struck home to you as the body blow of a U-turn?
They're all horrendous, aren't they? But one that made me really angry was when they came up with that ridiculous excuse for not having to self-isolate after Johnson and Sunak self-isolating. So after coming into contact with someone with COVID, they had the audacity to claim they were part of some special study, which meant that it was fine for them to go around potentially infecting other people who might go home and pass it on to their vulnerable friends and relatives who might die. When I think about all of the things that he's done in Parliament, all of the votes that he's actively taken part in, and all of the policies they've implemented which have led to people's deaths, and he just doesn't even care to look someone in the eyes and think, I could kill you or your loved ones, but it's fine because I'm so important.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a good one, Kat. I'm sorry, James in the lead at the moment. I mean, sort of losing Christmas to being a mass murderer. Jane capped it there. So let's see what Sam thinks. Sam, which was your most awful U-turn?
The one that I think possibly one of the ones that's caused so much damage to the credibility of the government and possibly to public health was how face coverings in shops, that for such a long time the government was adamant that face coverings didn't, in fact, using a face covering could spread COVID because you would touch your face by putting it on, and then you would then get COVID, and you would put your fingers in your eyes or something stupid like that. And that was peddled out. That was peddled out so much that, you know, I mean, I was telling people, because I want to do the right thing. And I am telling people what the government tell me because I believe in my heart of hearts that they want people to survive this pandemic. And then a few months later, suddenly we've got face masks must be worn in shops. And I think the fact that they did that means that you got less take up of masks, more mask resistance. And then now that people have the option to wear a mask or to not, I think you probably find if we could turn back the clock and have face masks from the start, I think we'd still see a lot more face masks now that people do it optionally, you know?
Yeah, I think you're right. Paul, what was your worst thing?
So the worst one that is on that list is the exams and going out to bat for Gavin Williamson when he'd made an algorithm decide what people were going to get based upon their postcode, based upon their social circumstances. Like, well, you know, you're a bit poor, so you can do a little bit badly in your exams. And they were going to they rolled it out for the A-levels, and as you remember, like, all the private schools did really, really well, and all the rich kids did really, really well, and all the poor kids did way more badly than they should have done. And then they had to U-turn on that and give them teacher grades in that first year of the exams under these circumstances. So that was a huge one for me. That really, really hurt people's feelings. That really exposed how little this government care for ordinary people and how little they think of us. They think actually your life circumstances define you. It defines your ability to use your brain, and that's a huge thing. And I think in years to come that'll really, really come back to bite them when we remind people of that. Think of that generation of children coming through now, and young adults now, as they were doing the A-levels. They're going to think, you decided that I was thick, that I was unable to do my work, unable to do well in my exams because of who I am, because of where I'm from, because of, in some cases, it'll be the colour of your skin. Because that, like, you know, those social circumstances may not have been explicitly in the algorithm, but they'll have been underneath with where people live, you know, and so on. So those are the things that people will really, really remember, I think, in years to come. And that's going to bite the Conservative Party for ever, I hope, because that was just mean. The one that isn't on the list is the one about safety standards, etc. The Brexit deals, we won't have worse standards, and it's not on that list. We won't have worse standards. We won't sell things to the NHS. I thought it was worthy of note there as well, because that's not on there as a U-turn, but it was a U-turn on a manifesto commitment. And no one seems to have, like, the press haven't done their job on that one. So I do like to remind people that they have gone back on a manifesto commitment to have no detriment in food standards and no further privatisation by American companies of the NHS. Both have been reneged on.
And as always, two, not one from Paul. We always get a double dose from Paul. I think, Paul, however, you won. You persuaded me on exams that he's just ruined the futures and the confidence of a whole generation. Me, if you wanted to mind, if you're interested, and I've got 60 seconds left, raw sewage. And secondly, taking the knee. I think the U-turns on those were horrific. But for me, the biggest thing has been all these Tories trotting out to support Boris in the first thing. In our case, our MP going in the newspaper and defending them in the local rag, and then suddenly changing course and trying to pretend that he hasn't just chopped them off at the knees. And what a shambles that crowd are. But there we go. Put your top U-turns on, and I'm sure Sam will be very excited. And we finish on time. And you've been wonderful, team, tonight. I just love this team. Thank you very much. And sort of well done to all of you. And thank you so much, everybody, for commenting on the comments and for listening to us. We're going to go away for 5 minutes now. We're all going to listen to that top bloke. Oh, by the way, have they taken that vote yet with sort of hope not hate vote that we were all
I don't know
voting?
if it's concluded yet. So if it is possible, could someone stick the vote for Joe up on the chat, please?
It's still going. We need to vote for Joe. We're going to listen to his music. We're going to come back and Sam will take charge. And there's a whole load of stuff where she'll be really interested in what you've had to say today. Bye-bye. See you in 5 minutes. See you.
My name is Jack Atkinson, I'm not afraid. And I live and die by this vow that I've made. The only good fascist's a dead one, they say. And around here we are. When I first left all them months ago, I told him I'd come not to kill but to cure. Well, for an ambulance driver my shot's pretty sure. And around here we are. There'll be no pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. Fascists have come for our freedom, and we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pass around here today. I told my mother, now mother be strong, for the left way is right and the right way is wrong. And you can stick that on my grave when I'm gone, for I'm here we are. There'll be no pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. Fascists have come for our freedom, and we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pass around here today. Cast may be cast, and the cast may be cast, but you armies of darkness, you best do your worst. 'Cause to win, yeah, well, you gotta get past those first. And around here we are. There'll be no pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. The fascists have come for our freedom, and we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pass around here, no pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. No pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. No pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. The fascists have come for our freedom. We ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no place around here today. Keep the red flag flying there.
Cake, 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 cake.
We have checked the cake. The cake looks fine. So I know that you would have been waiting for that. I had a great time on Sunday. I totally took over like a karaoke. I went to a karaoke night, and it was like the first karaoke night this particular pub has ever done. And it was just me and another lass who just sang the whole time. That was almost my moment of the week. Oh yeah, let's do that, Chris. Chris says Cat Chris seems to be enjoying a single malt. Is that true?
It's apple juice. I'm sorry.
Oh.
But Chris, it is my whiskey glass, and it is my big ice that I use when I drink whiskey. But I thought I'd go the apple juice. I'm very sorry to disappoint you.
Okay, but you do drink whiskey, is that correct?
I do enjoy a nice single malt, yes.
And what whiskey do you like?
Oh, that's just a boring head up your arse conversation, Sam, talking about fancy
I'm just passing on what Chris has asked me
peaties,
to
whatever.
Okay. You know, I went to Northern Pride's Halloween ball, which was fantastic, and it was amazing. It was amazing, surrounded by amazing Halloweeny drag queens. It was brilliant. Anyway, but yeah, I had the awkward situation of drinking the hotel dry of Jack Daniels. Bonnie came back from the bar and she's like, the next one can't be a Jack Daniels, Samantha, because they've got none left. It's a hotel, surely that's not right. That was me feeling fancy, because at home I drink Aldi's own brand Jack Daniels. Do you drink gin?
I don't know, I haven't never got the taste for it. So, and I just like food too much. So I look at the drink and then I just think, oh, I could have a pizza instead of that. So I'll just do that.
And are you off the drink because of your healthy lifestyle, John? Not John, Paul. No.
Oh, they're saying that you're muted on the chat, Paul.
What I said was sorry. I just I mute myself sometimes on the computer program I use to thingy. I said that I am only drinking on special occasions at the moment, rather than any day ending in Y, which I used to do. But yeah, I can drink Havana Club. If I wanted to have a drink, I would drink a nice Cuban rum rather than a whiskey at the minute. Although Ardmore, I've got some Ardmore in the cupboard. I might have some of that at some point in the before Christmas at some point.
I seem to remember you don't drink, John. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm going to spoil the conversation. I'm virtually teetotal. Both my grandparents signed the pledge because both of them had to stay at home in their teenage years to defend their mother against an alcoholic drunkard of a father. remember that the Labour Party was born in Methodism, sort of who are violently opposed to alcohol, and alcohol does so much damage in our society. It underlies so much of the violence, so much of the trouble that goes on. So I'm a bit hostile. It's like everything else. If there's nothing wrong with enjoying a drink, and occasionally I will drink when we go out for a meal or at special, but it's got such a hold on our society. And one thing I cannot stand is how everybody think it's so funny to get drunk, and so funny to be paralytically drunk, and it's not at all. It's a huge tragedy and a personal embarrassment to those people. I hate it. And the other thing, of course, is that people talk rubbish. They think it loosens the tongue and makes it better. When you're sat in a room and they're all getting drunk and you're not, it's a nightmare. Sort of. So I'm sorry to spoil it, and I really have no problem with people enjoying a drink. I'm not going to be a killjoy, but it's got a far too high profile in our society for my liking.
I was told by Tim Dredge before, when we went to a dinner, it was over at Bishop Auckland, he said the most coherent, clearly drunk conversation he had ever heard was me and Chami Chakrabarti. Apparently both a bit a little bit tipsy, and having a very coherent and intelligent conversation, apparently. I can't imagine it was true, but it was really nice of him to say that, so cheers, Tim. I always think of that.
I mean, Shami Chakrabarti, goodness me. I was talking with amazement the next day about how much she put away, and sort of concerned, and then somebody said, "Have you never heard the phrase drunk as a lord?" She was brilliant, but yeah, I think I stayed out far too late and I couldn't get a taxi home, and I did get home. One of the lovely lads from Durham University Labour Club drove me home because the young'uns at Durham University Labour Club, staying sober so they could drive. One of the things that challenges me, because I do drink, but I also appreciate the damage that is created in our society by alcohol. But one thing that annoys me more and more is the joking about alcoholism, and joking making jokes about, after having those kids all day, you're going to need a stiff one, and joking about drinking wine at kids' parties, and that annoys me, because I do see the harm, and I'm like, it's not really that funny though, is it? It's not funny if you need a gin to get through the day. That's a problem. Yeah, Amelia says, why are the health problems associated with drinking not discussed, but the effects of smoking are? There are mental issues, physical issues, violence and death caused by drinking. Yeah, it's not an issue. I think it definitely depends on who you talk to. I think it's tricky, isn't it? It comes back to one of the if you're going to be cynical about it, you're like, well, the government gets loads of money in through taxation, having these legalized drugs in circulation, so and there's big business. Did you see when Rishi Sunak did his budget, and he said, I've got great news for pubs and small beer producers, because I'm gonna have a different category of tax for beer. And basically, when you look into it, the only beer producers that are going to benefit from this are like the big lager producers, Carlsberg and Foster's, because actually they've set a category which only they fall into, and the small producers will still be taxed.
Yeah, it's the size of the kegs, isn't it? There's really big kegs.
Yeah.
I also think with alcohol, there's a social issue there where, I think at the end of the day, when people are going and drinking and they're saying, right, actually I've had an awful day, I've got an awful job. I feel absolutely awful. I feel totally unsupported or whatever. And you go to alcohol as a crutch to kind of make you feel better. It doesn't make you feel better in the long term. It makes you feel worse in the long term, and then you feel unhealthy and all these things. And we've got a massive problem there with regards to the things that we do to ourselves as well, because it's not just drinking the alcohol, it's what leads you to think, actually, I've had such a stressful day that I need to do this. Our society's built in a really weird way. I often think when it's a social drink, when people are around and having fun, and they're doing it occasionally, then that's quite, like, it can be a good thing. I know not everyone can do that, and I know there are people with alcohol problems that couldn't do that. But I think most of the alcohol problems are that other one. It's like, I'm doing this as a crutch. I'm doing this to get through my day. I'm doing this because I really, really am unhappy. And that's the big issue I think people have.
I noticed that Mark Lungley says the same could be since the health things about sugar. Absolutely agree, but also salt. I've been doing a little bit of reading up about this. The problems caused by salt, and we all eat regularly at least 4 or 5 times as much salt in a day as we need to. So my wife Barbara, she just gets cross because she says that supermarket shelves are just full of things that kill us. Why do we allow it? Why do we allow these firms to produce this stuff? And it's just destroying our bodies. But there you go.
Got to have some fun sometimes, though, eh?
Well, yes.
I think, for me, this time of year, working... Sorry, Sam.
No, it's all right. It was just like, why have a supermarket shelves full of things that are tasty and kill us? Because of capitalism. That's how it works.
Sam brings it round at last. I'm laughing here about Sir Chris Hood saying, I didn't want the conversation to go this way. What's happened? I only asked what Kat was drinking. I'm sorry, Kat, I interrupted you there.
No, not at all. I feel I've let the team down by drinking apple juice and making cake. I'm very unlike myself this evening. I promise to improve and have much worse behaviour next week. No, I was just going to say, this time of year on the tube, one of the worst things I ever have to deal with normally happens end of November, beginning of December, not during the pandemic, but it's the Christmas piss up. They're honestly the most horrendous inventions I've ever seen. And you know what? I'm all for going out with your friends who are going to watch you back, make sure you get home if you're the one that's had a bit more to drink than everyone else. But the horrendous scenario of going to drink with people you're not necessarily close with and you're not paying for the drink so you can pack a few more away is carnage. It's awful. I dread it every year. I dread my week of nights for that run where people you just sort of see how friendship doesn't necessarily exist in your workplace necessarily, and everyone gets absolutely off their head, and then everyone goes off separately and has to try and get home. And then normally what happens is I help carry you up the stairs, or you puke on my shoes, or I end up having to call an ambulance for you. It's never very pretty.
Well, Chris Hood, what did you think of that as a conversation stopper, eh? Agree with you, Kat.
Yeah. I'm going to go with Ruth's question, but I will preface it by saying we talked about this before, and it upset people in the audience that we would talk frankly about our views on vaccination status being linked to your employment. So, please remember, none of us get to make these decisions, and we're allowed to agree and disagree and have opinions on what type of medical procedures should be linked to somebody's employment. Paul, earlier on, you put something on Facebook about vaccinations and NHS workers. Do you want to give us a brief introduction to anybody who might not have heard it?
Yeah, this is one of the more divisive ones. So I shared that NHS workers were going to have to be vaccinated or they will lose their jobs. And personally, I think that is a really dangerous and authoritarian step. The reason I think that is these people have been working in the NHS throughout this entire time. They've been exposed to the virus time again. We've applauded them on doorsteps. We've lauded them as being these absolutely brilliant people. And for whatever reason, it could be cultural. It could be simply distrust in the government. It could be whatever. Some of them, a very small percentage of them, have decided that they are not having the vaccination. And there's this argument that they need to and they must be forced to. Now, I'm not for forcing anyone to do anything. Like, I don't think that is the way we build our society. Convince? Fine. Encourage? Fine. But force and make them unemployed after everything they've been through. They may have had COVID like 5 or 6 times throughout that time. They may have natural immunity. Actually, natural immunity, you're about 13 times more likely to get it, to get COVID, if you have had the vaccine over people who have natural immunity who caught it. Okay, so the vaccine isn't as powerful and it isn't as long lasting as natural immunity that people get. So there are a variety of reasons why people might not choose to do that. And the idea that the government would now force people to do it, I believe it's in order to make sure they go to work. I don't think it's to protect anyone. I don't think it's to stop the spread, because the government's other actions aren't showing me that they want to stop the spread. They never really have done. They've always looked like they wanted to stop the spread, like that impression thing that I was speaking about earlier on. They wanted it to look like they wanted to do that. So I really don't trust the motives on this one, and I have a problem with forcing things. That's not to say I don't think the vaccine should be taken. That's not to think I don't think the vaccine is a very good thing, and I was as delighted as everyone else when it came out. I just don't like people being forced into doing things, and there are a variety of consequences to this, such as NHS staff shortages, which are already looking bad because of the number of people from the EU who aren't allowed to work here. This could be a manufactured crisis that actually pushes the NHS over the edge as well, and they're going to say, oh, well, we'll need to privatise it or whatever. Like, this is the way my brain works. I don't necessarily trust the government's actions on this one. And I don't like the idea of vaccine passports either. So I'm not really into that kind of authoritarian thing. But I know a lot of people just think, right, okay, this needs to be done. They should take the vaccine. It does mildly reduce the transmission. It does protect them, and that's up to people to think that. I'm quite scared of authoritarianism. So,
Jen, what do you think?
I think that if we were sure that the vaccine stopped you from passing the illness on to other people, then we should really think about the fact that we need to look at patient safety and colleague safety. But as we know that the vaccine doesn't stop you passing the illness on, it seems very heavy-handed to force people to have it or lose their jobs, because I think the risk is greater to themselves. I'm not sure they're actually posing an extra risk to anyone apart from themselves, and that's their choice, I would say.
John?
I have no problem with requiring certain things of people to do a certain job. Taxi drivers have to get a license. Doctors have to pass a degree and all these exams to practice it. I can see that there is an argument which says if you want to work in this job, you've got to have been vaccinated. That's just part of the qualifications for doing the job. I think it's particularly cruel, as Paul has pointed out, if you're going to do so retrospectively, particularly after these people have put their lives on the line to actually help others. I think that's a bit of a do. I take everything Paul says about forcing people to do things. It's much better if you can do it. But the main thing is that whilst I mean, I've had both vaccinations. I do agree with that guy who said it's antisocial not to have the vaccine. I'll have my booster, but I didn't tend to agree with Paul that sort of right or wrong, whatever you think about the vaccine, you cannot deny that the government is using the vaccine as part of a strategy. And I think that whereas everybody else is trying to stop the deaths, the government is sort of using the vaccine to try and pretend that the deaths and the contagion isn't happening. And I think they're just sort of allowing herd immunity to go ahead, and they're hiding behind the vaccine rollout to sort of take our eyes off what they're doing. Tim Dredge is absolutely right. Hundreds of people, I think 1,200 deaths a week. You know, I mean, it's horrific, the number of people. So 1 in 50 people in the UK have got it. And it's not just people who haven't had the vaccine, it's people who've had the vaccine, but sort of old people are starting to die at the same rate. The whole thing is that the fact that I totally agree with the vaccine and with having vaccines doesn't mean that I can't see that there's a real problem with the way the government is implementing this. And I don't approve of that. So both sides at the same time, Sam. I'm sorry.
He's such a politician. Kat?
Well, I'm vaccinated. Give me all the jabs. Here's my arms. Go for it. I'll have one today. I'll have one tomorrow. I agree with Paul that they shouldn't be mandated. I would say that if his point on natural immunity was leaning towards herd immunity, that's a strategy that I have been and remain completely opposed to. I think we look at what the government aren't doing and what the government aren't saying and think about that a bit more. So they've put all their eggs in one basket. They're saying that the vaccine, and they have been saying this for a very large amount of time, the vaccine is the solution. But they have, as we discussed earlier, removed mandatory mask wearing, removed social distancing, removed almost all of the PHE guidelines that we've been working with. People can choose to wear a mask. Bosses can choose to implement social distancing and encourage people that want to work from home, but that's not happening. So that's terrible health and safety. I'm a health and safety rep. It's terrible health and safety saying have the jab, nothing else. But I also think on an ethical basis, to force somebody to have an injection that does not want to is the wrong thing. It is unethical to force somebody to do that. But it is absolutely critical that the government, and it's not going to, by the way, but that the government genuinely prioritizes the whole complex arrangement of health and safety, which isn't just get an injection. It's all the other things. It's ventilation, it's CO2 monitors, it's HEPA filters, it's social distancing, it's mask wearing, and it's good hand hygiene.
Yeah, thanks, Kat. I think the parallel that struck me is that Boris Johnson won't wear a mask in a hospital, but he's happy to back a government that is going to mandate low-paid hospital workers to have a vaccination or lose their job, right? And I just think that parallel is so stark. And when you know, they won't even force MPs to wear masks in the House of Commons, but they'll force somebody to have an injection against their will to keep their job. I just think, you know, it's choice for people who can afford to have choice. And for people who are on the lower rungs, you know, you get what you like. It's libertarianism for rich people, but people lower down, well, I just have to do what we tell them to do. And like you say, it's because they don't want to actually support businesses to allow people to work from home, to work flexibly, to distance, and they don't want to do anything that might help schools reduce. I mean, one of the roaring places of infection at the moment is in school-age children, and there's absolutely nothing in place to support schools to reduce that, to the point where, and I've said it before on this program, but I will say it again, if you have a family with several children and one of your children tests positive for COVID and you don't send your other children into school, you can be fined by the government for doing so. Like, they'd rather do that and force low-paid NHS workers to get a job than to bring in the rock solid health and safety stuff that is based on science that we know works. It's just, I think when you look at those things in parallel, it just shows how strange it is, and how they're obviously not prioritizing health as the first priority. And it always will come down to me, as it's a my body, my choice thing. You know, I personally can't imagine that I will have all of the vaccinations, but just because I want all the vaccinations doesn't mean I can force it on someone else. And it's a huge ethical leap as well, because a lot of the doctors are coming out and saying, oh, well, I've had to have a hepatitis B vaccine as part of my job. But they knew that before they got the job. And I think that's also key, you know. I think yeah, it's the whole backdating this idea that it's part of your job. It's not right. Anyway, Paul, you waved.
Yeah, so it was just a little bit of clarification, because I obviously wasn't clear when I was talking about like the natural immunity. I wasn't saying that we should have a natural immunity and that should be the strategy. What I was saying is, imagine if there's a doctor or someone who works in the NHS who's had COVID a number of times, who could have a higher level of natural immunity than the vaccine would give them, losing their job because they haven't been vaccinated, even though the vaccine wouldn't work as well as what they actually have in them. Like, there's all sorts of things. You could test for antibodies, you could test for all sorts of different things. The research isn't done on that one. And as you say, it's like, it's a little bit like, you made an excellent point there, Samantha. It's a little bit like the tattoo policy. Like, one place I was working, they brought in a policy as a dress code. It was saying you can't have tattoos. I was like, well, this can't stand for people who already have tattoos. So you can say that and say, right, well, you aren't allowed any more tattoos. You can't go, if you get another tattoo, you've got to cover it up. But the ones that exist have to be allowed to be visible, because they're the conditions that they joined on. You didn't have this no tattoo policy when they came in. So therefore, like, you know, you can't move the goalposts when people are already in. It's incredibly unfair, but you kind of made that point a bit better than me, Samantha, so sorry. But yeah.
We'll just briefly go back to the sort of the U-turns before we sign off for the night. Somebody made a funny joke. Where's it gone?
It was Ruth. I read it. It was about Stanley.
Yeah, Ruth basically said it's a shame that Stanley Johnson's sperm didn't do a U-turn.
Hey.
Ba-boom. Yeah, I like that. Also, commiserations to Mark, who has Gavin Williamson as his MP. Oh dear. And you'll probably be seeing a lot more of him now as well. So sorry about that. But our gain is your loss. Lots of love for Mish in the comments. Mish is a top geezer, says Paul.
He is, like, he's been poorly this week, so he's just come out.
He was on a TV.
He was. It's a busy week.
He was on a TV quiz show.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't usually see such things, but I was like, I know him. Yeah. Headhunters or something. It's again, I thought it was totally a terrible place for him to be, because it's like based on terrible business things. Anyway, Ruth says dogs fireworks. Ruth says my dog has to be wrapped in scarves and held. My daughter screamed so hard because the loud noises that she vomited. The bonfire at the bottom of the street got out of hand when somebody put a cardboard police officer on it and then threw petrol on it. Then a child got hit in the face with a firework. I personally hate fireworks. I was in a firework accident when I was a child, which luckily there was no damage to my hearing, but literally had firework like fired at the side of my head. Yeah, no, do not like them. The beginning of lockdown, right? So you remember Bubbles, right? So I've got a friend who sadly lost her husband a couple of years back. So she came into our family as part of our bubble. And she thought she was doing a lovely thing because she got me like a birthday cake, but then like she covered it with these like fireworky, sprinkly evil things. And there were like 4 of them on the cake, and she brought them into the room, and I'm like, no, oh, get down, doesn't cover.
Hey, Samantha, you know when you said remember Bubbles, I was thinking, what, Michael Jackson's monkey?
I went ab fab. I thought she was about to talk about Absolutely Fabulous.
No. I'm glad it took you all on that journey though. Oh dear. Mark says, as an ex-chemistry student, he loved lighting fireworks safely. And at one time he looked into training to do the big displays. Wow. And then Tim called him a fire starter. Oh, well, I do love you all in your comments in your chat. And the things you come out with through the day. It feels like a day. It's only been an hour and a half. But I am going to say good night, and it's time for us to end. So thank you very much, Kat and Jane, for coming, and you are always welcome, and please come back. And hopefully, but also at the same time, hopefully we will have God, I've forgotten their names already. Stuart
and Laura.
And Laura back soon.
What is over your head very quickly?
It's because you've got an amazing jumper on, Sam.
Yes, okay, I have this jumper on. Obviously takes all of my brain. It's just been a long day. As always, I'm just gonna have to get used to it now. They're all gonna be long days, aren't they? Anyway, thank you for coming. Thank you for leaving a comment and liking and sharing. If you are watching us on one platform, why not try and pick up another one? We are on Twitter and YouTube and Facebook and Twitch. And we are also on your favorite podcast app. If you search for us and subscribe to us, I'm sure that we will pop up when you least expect it and bring some socialist conversation into your life just when you need us to. Have you got any fancy special shows coming up soon, Paul?
I don't. We'll have something lined up for Saturday. We'll have something great on, but I don't know what it is yet.
Fantastic.
So
well,
we're doing that flying by the seat of our pants kind of thing again. But yeah, we do have something. We have got something lined up with me and Dan Lewis. We might even be doing some proper Twitch stuff, playing a daft game or something while we talk about the week's news. We're coming up with a format that's kind of quite interesting. So, or might not be. It might be really, really incredibly boring. Could be.
What was I going to say? What else was? How is Laura? People will be wondering.
Laura is getting there. She's been a trooper, as you would expect. As a parent, you can have COVID, and it doesn't mean you have to get some rest. So one of the kids is testing negative all the time. The other one won't have a test, but is staying off school because he's not very well. But schools don't give tests anymore. That's an interesting one. And from my school, we've had 5 people sent home with symptoms today, so things are getting quite messy again. But the government aren't funding the tests. So like whilst they are doing that, with one hand they're saying get vaccinated compulsorily, they're also not getting children to be tested. And that's it's an interesting thing, and I'm testing negative all the time as well, so it's a bit weird as well, because I have to go in from a house with COVID in it to a school, and then take my children to another school, and then go and pick them up, and I can go about my daily business, but Laura can't, because she quite rightly shouldn't, because she's got COVID, but I don't have a choice because I can't not go to work.
It's
Weird.
just exactly what we were talking about earlier, wasn't it? It's we're getting so my kids are in a 2-form entry school, so it's not a tiny school, but it's not a huge school, and we're getting kind of two letters a week saying that there's a child with COVID, but there's a child with COVID, but please continue sending your child to school. Oh gosh, what a world we live in. Anyway, there was one quick reminder you can also join Socialist Think Tank as a member for free. Just look us up. It's on there. There's a link. It's socialistthinktank.com/members/sign_up. And I will see you all around. Okay, we're properly going now. Bye.
Thanks everyone. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Keep the red flag flying here.